Victor, thank you so much for joining. And where I want to start is there are few people operating at the scale of the soul. So I want to talk about the technology and the platform, but probably starting with what did you see in the market of like social media and content broadly, but specifically, where did you see the opportunity to grow the soul?
Yeah, thanks, Jeff, and I'm very excited to be here having this conversation with you. So, yeah, I think what's very interesting, maybe I can talk about my experience. So, when
Yeah.
back in 2019, I was at the Lego Group, so the famous brand,
Hmm.
and I was actually looking to see what's going on in digital media at that time. Who was doing interesting stuff, and I looked at the, let's say, the some of the social media that everyone knows, like BuzzFeed and so on, and more of the legacy media, and see what they were building as well. But obviously, they start with a different point of view. And then I stumbled upon the Soul, and I saw that everything was they were doing all of the right thing in terms of like approaching social media as like the main platform and the main destination for where the audience should be.
Hmm.
Where a lot of other maybe digital companies got a little bit lost. They were a bit torn between like, okay, we have our own properties we want to send to, but at the same time we also want to grow where the audience is. Where the Soul straight away made the statement that, okay, we will distribute content where people are. And that's also why over time, we grew. Like, company was mostly present on YouTube and Facebook, but then over time now distribute across more than 50 platforms. So that's kind of, I say, that like the main mission. But to support that, you need to have good processes and good technology.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
that's, yeah, for me that's kind of the key. So yeah, this was like obviously also part of what has made me excited about the Soul when I started.
Well, I think there are two different forms of content. There is the kind of content, and I think the vast majority of people that are creating content, whether that's organizations or individual creators, that they have an idea and they're creating that, and they're kind of hoping the audience is there. And what I've noticed with this all is that you're defining, much like what Netflix does, where you have data and you define what the audience is and what the audience is looking for, right? So when Netflix knows that a lot of people watch certain kinds of content, they create more of that content, right? So I think it's the reverse engineering of, and you kind of alluded to it too, is knowing, meeting the audience where they are. If you know what the audience wants, then you tailor it to the audience, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's also why we have a very strong ideation department. And actually, we have a whole team dedicated to finding new ideas, looking for inspiration across different platforms. And that feeds into existing brands and concepts, but also new potential brands and concepts. And yeah, also we make sure, to your point, that preferences of viewers are evolving really fast. Like 4 or 5 years
Yeah.
ago, nobody was watching videos under 1 minute. I mean, there was Vine, but didn't really take off. I guess it was the wrong time. But after that, yeah, those kind of preferences didn't exist. So these are things that come quick. If you're not really monitoring or continuing to do what you're comfortable doing, you can miss the trend as a company. So I think, it's not just kind of what you know how to do and optimize that, but also really like questioning what are the big shifts and try to get there early on.
Yeah, I mean, it's data informed. I mean, certainly there's trial and error in anything, right? I mean, like not everything. I think with the model, not everything has to be a hit. It doesn't have to be a massive success because it's diversified. The portfolio is incredibly diversified. But I think there's a net value in having so many different properties. I mean, for the listener who doesn't probably kind of know the full extent, just kind of explain like a quick primer on what the soul's properties are and what are kind of the key points of content.
Yeah, so we are a digital media studio, so we produce and distribute our own content, and we have over the time launched different type of verticals. So the first one that we launched was 5 Minute Craft, so it's one of the biggest brand for DIY in the world. We also launched a Brightside, which is more edutainment, we call it. So this mix of animation and entertainment, and produce videos for YouTube. We have over 40 million subscribers in English, but we also have localized version think that's another thing. We really focus on this content that is universal and positive, so that it doesn't just work for one country or one very specific demographic, but it can work across different borders, languages, and we can easily translate and localize that content. And then we have also brands that we develop specifically for younger audiences, like Say Climb Sam, which is a little slime. We're very popular in Latin America, for instance. Baby Zoo, which is more preschool, and a wide range of other brands for different type of audiences, because we're constantly launching new ones as well.
Well, I think that's the missed opportunity sometimes, right? In content for a lot of people, right? If you build something like 5 Minute Crafts and other things that is universal, can easily be translated or captioned in multiple languages, you have now opened up an opportunity for a vast audience, right? If you have one single person talking to the camera, that just limits your opportunities. And I think that's part of the genius of the content, right? Is knowing the market segmentation, knowing who might be into it, but building it with the intentionality of knowing, yes, you can take this to 130 different markets potentially.
Yeah, no, definitely. And like, it's interesting because, as part of my remit, I talk to sometimes streaming platforms or even broadcast platforms. And there, it's very country specific. You buy the program or you sell the program for Germany, for France, Spain, but
Yeah.
we actually have to then go back to our data, because when we look in terms of languages. We have very good Spanish offering and Spanish audience, so Spanish speaking, not necessarily in Spain, right? So because again, like, we put our content on global platforms, and then we then target the entire population, not necessarily like one specific country. So I think that has helped us a lot, and it's a key point of focus as well, to have that kind of global remit. And what we see as well is that even with the shift going on right now, with short form content taking a bigger part overall, it's still something that continues, because some of the biggest brands on TikTok, for instance, is Kaby Lame, which is like very universal. It doesn't talk. It's like little sketches that everyone can understand across the world and everyone enjoys. 5 Minute Craft is quite big as well on TikTok, for instance. So I think it followed that pattern as well, where we see that universal content and can connect people between countries. And then what maybe is a small niche, if you think about the scale of like a country, actually can become quite big when you think about the whole world.
Absolutely. I mean, there's also this value too, in like when you're creating so many different things that, and I mean, I'm going to assume that the consumer doesn't always know that they're all tied to the same parent company, but it's interesting. Like, I make the comparison that if you're in the supermarket, right, and you go to the shelf and there are 7 different brands, and then you realize, oh, they're all made by the same place.
Yeah.
So it's interesting to know, it's like, no matter what taste or preference you might have, you have built something for someone to engage with the brand. How often, I mean, you're alluding to this again too, as tastes change, but how often are you mindful of or looking toward the future of how you're going to have to adapt content? Is that a monthly, yearly, daily process?
I think I would say it's a daily process, because we
Yeah.
have this data point, and it's not just coming from one person or one group of people in the organization. It's we have producers that manage certain brands, and they would obviously observe what are the shift for their specific audiences, and then we have people that are working with different platforms and making sure that they understand the roadmap, where they want to go, so they will also see different things and have different data points. And I think all those people are working together to make sure we are evolving what we do. So I think the latest, let's say, big example was when it was in 2019. So like TikTok was starting to be a thing, but it was not yet the thing that it is today, because really like pandemic 2020-21 was when it
Yep.
really exploded. But we saw that this was something, and there was something going on there. So we started to launch on TikTok in 2019, on Snapchat as well at the same time, and then the year after, like as soon as YouTube opened Shorts in India, we because we also have content for Indian audience and localized for that language, we we also launched there. So we were able to very quickly like see what kind of data we were getting, performance, what we needed to adapt. And we started by launching our own brands, but over time we pivoted to launch spin-off and then actually brand new IPs as we saw that the audience was rising. The business model wasn't necessarily clear at the time, but like we thought that it's a decision that we need to make to follow the audience.
Yeah, it's not dissimilar to some kind of written publishers too that will take 5 or 6 swings at content depending on different sites, and they'll basically just be A/B testing what works, what doesn't work, and then when they see something that works, then they pour more resources into it. I'm assuming
Mm-hmm.
that's kind of the same general concept. The other thing for me too is that, and I think this is important for the audience, is that you hop on trends quickly, but you don't have to be the first and the earliest adopter. If you know how to leverage one platform, you're going and utilize the data, you're going to know how to leverage other platforms. I have these conversations a lot. If I have to go on media and talk about social media, and I had a recent conversation today on the news where they were asking me about TikTok policy. And I said, like, well, I don't think that US TikTok policy, like, regardless of what happens with that, I don't see creators being unable to pivot, right? Whether it's to shorts, to reels, to whatever it might be. I've witnessed over the course of over 15-year career in this that if you know how to create content and you know how to build an audience, that you're pretty much platform agnostic and you will know how to find the ways to best cater to that platform and that system. Yes, there are nuances, of course, and I think you can probably speak to that too with TikTok especially, but generally speaking, if you know how to build an audience and you know how to look at your data, whatever the next platform is too, you'll be able to build for that.
Yeah, I agree 100%. And that's also the power of the IP. I mean, in
Mm-hmm.
your case, like, there are different examples, but yeah, like for case of a creator, they would also have some form of IP, which is themselves. For us, we have brands that actually are, strong in terms of viewership. And, to your point as well about the supermarket, like if I say that I work for Soul Publishing, I have to explain. But if I say 5 Minute Craft, there's a chance, depending on the
Yes.
demographic, that people will have seen some of our videos, hopefully. And so what we notice as well, so because we are in we are want to be where the audience is. So something like 5 Minute Crafts on YouTube, Facebook, also short form. And we launched, actually it was a few years ago now, on Roku in the US.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like a TV platform, so a little bit different, longer version of our content for TV audience. And we typically for those platforms, people that are familiar with will know, like it's a bit of different discovery. You're much more in the TV space, and it's about you can have the program, the TV guide, and it's not so much algorithm based and this kind of discovery that you find on social media or your friends recommend things and so on. So there we didn't do any marketing when we launched. We launched a couple of brands there, and actually we got straight away millions of views on the Roku platform without any kind of marketing, just because there was this strong IP. And I think it's not just us, but we see also when other brands launch there and they have already a strong presence, or creators, then we see that they have this benefit of already having built an audience, and then it's just a matter of adapting for this specific medium. TV is a bit different than the 3 to 10 minute video that you find on social media, and it's also a little bit different than the short video that you find, but it's not as hard as if you have to start from scratch.
No, absolutely. But yeah, and you're right too, like with an algorithmic form of content, right? Once you get somebody into your content once or twice, right, it's going to keep coming into that feed because, they've shown an affinity for it, right? When we were talking internally in the org, right, when we were about to do this interview, all I had to say was 5 Minute Crafts. Everybody's like, oh, yeah. watch a ton of that. But
I never
that
do. I
that's
never do them, but I watch them. That's
yeah,
perfect.
yeah. Well, that's it. Yeah, yes. Crafts or food videos are so easy to consume, to be inspired, to make you want to do things. Sometimes I get the impulse to want to do the thing, and then I still don't because then life gets in the way. But what I think is, like, you kind of beat me to what I thought was going to be the next question, which was, we're in 2024 right now. There are, it's interesting because I don't think we have, and you can question my premise here too, but I don't think we have as many changes or shifts in platforms right now as we had a few years prior. I think we're in a little bit more of a like calmer state of like we know who the players are, but where do you identify what, like you obviously mentioned Roku, but where do you identify future opportunities, or where do you see the space of short form going?
hmm Yeah, I think it's an interest. I mean, yeah, I'm curious to hear why you think it's not changing as much. I mean, I guess that when short form came and then we had pandemic, it was such a wide change that now, like even subtle changes of every day, are
Yeah.
we don't feel as impacted maybe. Uh, I mean, yeah, we do see an interesting shift in terms of I mean, social media and video content in general online used to be pretty much YouTube and a little bit of Facebook, maybe. So, it was like 3 10-minute videos, audience consume on desktop and mobile over time, and that's it. Now there is like so much more complexity to it. You have the short form, on one platform, you have actually several formats, live streams, podcasts. So, like, uh, yeah, and what we see is basically this is not stretching. So you have the regular one, you have the regular format, you have the super short format, and then audiences also want to consume the TV big screen type of content.
Yeah.
And YouTube is actually a big platform on TV. I mean, they every year they announce more and more numbers. We
Hmm.
have brands that get most of their viewership and watch time on TV on YouTube. So for us, we see it as like the natural next thing. And over the last few years, we launched on platforms like it can be Fast or VOD. So Fast is basically like a normal TV. Um, so things like Samsung TV, uh, and yeah, and Roku that I mentioned. So we see that there is appetite for finding the brands that you're finding online also on those. So yeah, we see that on the streaming on TV side there's a lot of changes because people are canceling their subscription, especially in the US for cable,
For sure.
and this is need to be replaced by something else. So Fast, which is kind of the buzz specifically in the TV world, but like it's basically reinventing TV, but you have your niche channels, except it's on the TV, so you have 24/7 of Gordon Ramsay, of 5 Minute Craft, like specific channel that are dedicated and with programming that are much more tailored towards TV audience. So there we see, we definitely see some movement. And then within the platforms, I think they all are trying to build upon the audience that they have, and trying to expand also to support both the creators but also the viewers. Things like e-commerce. I saw that you had a guest, Nicole, I think a couple of
Yeah.
weeks ago, like, and yeah, so like I think they're trying to also add within these experiences. So I wouldn't be surprised if a year or two we see like a different platform emerging, maybe tailoring to specific niche audience within e-commerce and social. Like I think it could come from anywhere really.
Yeah, and that part to me is that part is fascinating, right? Because I think, to kind of go back to the premise I was leading with, and where you might have been curious what I was thinking is, I think there's an economy of scale in social media where we've just gotten to a point where when it's early on, obviously a Pinterest, and Instagram, a Snapchat, all these things can appear, right? And things didn't work and things did work, right? Obviously Vine didn't work, Foursquare didn't work. There were a lot of things that didn't work that were either not right or not right for that time. But now where I'm looking at it is, I think there's just the change that you alluded to is correct, right? The changes is inside the platforms. I'm slightly more reticent to think that it will be easy to build an entire new platform, or that anybody will want to build a new platform, especially with the major players and the failed attempt of Google Plus a long time ago. You've seen that there aren't as many people that want to get into that. You are probably correct, though, in assuming that the next place of growth is in e-commerce and shopping, and taking influence that comes from creators and turning that into direct monetization through shopping. That was the fascination in the interview that I had with Nicole, is just how quickly you can capitalize on a trend. And if you attach that to something like fast fashion, and that you can, make something very quickly and turn that over, and all of a sudden you've got an overnight success of a business. That part is interesting, right? And
Yeah.
I don't disagree, right, in the idea that, I'm kind of like thinking about it in real time, that's where it could come from. But I think you are right that the majority of change is happening in, whether it's OTT or linear television, where as the players are shifting and changing, this creates opportunities for publishers like yourself or others to kind of fill that space of attention where people still want to consume television or television-based content, however that may look, but they have different options available. And to me, the most fascinating thing is that the cable bundle ever got divested, because I think, and tell me if I'm wrong, but the best business model ever is the one where people pay you for something that they don't even use.
Yes.
and somehow we got to this model that is much harder. And I think that's what the legacy cable companies slash networks slash now streamers are realizing, is like, oh no, we have to individually grab the attention and dollars of every single person who intentionally wants to consume our content.
Mm-hmm.
That is way more difficult. And I feel like where we're heading in that space is that we are heading toward a place where they're going to try and reintroduce through new technology the bundle again.
Mm-hmm.
They're like, please take our bundle idea back.
Yeah, it's just a different technology in the background, but it's the same thing for the consumer in some ways.
Yeah, absolutely. So for me, that part is fascinating for me. But
Mm-hmm.
where you've got a music division too, where are the other opportunities for you to grow and monetize?
Yeah, so obviously music is a very interesting one. It's also one that is in a way being disrupted by social media. I mean, it's also an industry that survives everything, but just evolve over time.
Mm-hmm.
What we've seen, I think, specifically with short form content, is how music discovery is changing. So you had radio before, then you had the platforms, but still, I think radio was still like a one that would influence a lot how people get discovered. Uh, Sorry, and my screensaver just stopped.
No, you're good.
And yeah, and now we have with short form, we can see that there is this new audience that actually discover music through short form. So because it's a big part of the experience, the music part, and I think TikTok is also realizing that to some extent with lack of some deals that they got recently. But
Yes.
what we see is like people actually get to find music. There's a lot of older music that nobody listened to anymore that are resurfacing because they are linked to specific trend or meme on such short form platform. And there are new artists as well that are getting discovered, purely just because people are attaching specific shorts, attaching the music to specific short form videos, and then people reuse it, and it's very easy to share and use the same music. So I think there's like really an interesting opportunity what we started to do. First, we made music for our properties tailored towards kids content, music rhyme and so on. Then we made music for because we use a lot of music, and historically we've used license and different banks. But say, why don't we produce our own music actually for our content? So that's what we started to do, and we also so that because we have such a reach on short form platform, we have billions of views per month. we actually can help seeding our music, and some of it actually happened to go viral. So we had a song called Busy Bee, which is quite an earworm. And and it's this 15 seconds 20 seconds fragment, which is very catchy, and there's a whole song attached to it. It's from one of our channel for teenagers. And yeah, like we started by using it in our content, use it across different brands, and then all of a sudden it started to take off. People started to use it. Someone created some filter so that you look like the bee in the video clip. So we didn't do that, they did that. And I think, like, yeah, we we went over like something like 2 billion listens on short form platform of that specific audio, because like a lot of people started to use it. I think there was like 50,000 videos that were created on TikTok, and 40,000 on YouTube Shorts, and I don't know how many on Facebook Reels. So, and that really like made the music go viral. And yeah, I think it's a very interesting model, because there's a lot of independent artists that are doing very good music, but still it's very hard to break through. And that can be, I think, an interesting way that, for us, it helps us in terms of obviously monetization, because you have royalties with music, and we can then launch artists and so on and support that. But I think also in general, it can really be beneficial to surface new artists, and bring more of a level playing field in terms of music as well.
Well, that's the interesting, like, inverse relationship, where when you become this big of a publisher with these many accounts, then you have some leverage and pull to be able to, as you said, launch artists or launch your own music content. I'm fascinated by. I think this is a short term, not a long term battle in the between the music industry and TikTok, where I understand that there's a relationship with royalties and what's expected, and negotiations are constant, right? But I think there is, if I'm on a major label or if I'm an independent artist, I do want the benefit of TikTok. I want the benefit of being able to be found and discovered there. It is wild, and you talked about it. It is wild to see songs from the '80s. Whether it was the song associated with Stranger Things, or recently more with Tracy Chapman. A song from the early '90s. But songs that have existed for a very long time becoming popular again, or it's independent artists. Right now, The Beaches, which is a Canadian band that's been around for 10 years, gets a very popular clip on TikTok, and immediately you see the benefit, because they are now on American television performing, and they're on Amazon, they're on Jimmy Kimmel Live. So you can see that even a 10-second clip that gets shared and becomes user-generated content and kind of takes a life of its own has real power and value. And from your standpoint too, it's kind of interesting. Like right now, if there are a ton of artists that right now, because there's a stalemate between labels and TikTok, if there's a blank space that exists where people can't launch through certain things, then that's creating other opportunities for other artists who are not associated to fill that space. And so it creates opportunities for you. It creates opportunities for the platform to kind of try and launch people. That's probably, I mean, again, I don't think that's the intent when you start a publishing group, right? You're trying to create really good content that appeals to a mass audience. But once you get to the scale that you are at now, well, now you can do the inverse, which is you can help launch other things and other people and be a valuable resource.
Yeah, no, exactly. I think that's super interesting. And also, let's not forget, to your point, that TikTok and Musically started as a music platform where people were dancing. So I
Yep.
think it's very integral part of the experience, and yeah, it's not something you can really take away. And we see it, with discovery, but also the way that trends are evolving, because every trend has their own sound that is attached to it. So yeah, it's great that people can basically be part of the trend. And also because now they're linking the charts, music charts, to some of this consumption.
Mm-hmm.
So you can actually be like legitimate. And I think, to go back to this, I don't think many of the, let's say, like, music industry has necessarily like realized that to their full extent, because a lot of it is still, a lot of the music is still launched through the traditional way of, like, you do your advertising, and you have the big artist, and you have to have some PR, which doesn't bring you any traffic, but it's nice for the label to see that there's an article somewhere. Obviously, that can be part of the strategy, but I think there's again an opportunity in general for independent artists to see how they can break through, directly by themselves. And I think this level playing field is something in general I've been super interested. I mean, the beginning of YouTube was all about broadcast yourself, and it was kind of a new thing. You still need to have a camera and a couple of things, but now I feel like it's accelerating where pretty much everyone has a lot of opportunity, whether they're musician, video content creator, uh, that you could end up on TV in a few years, basically, because like there's kind of this level playing field, and some of the barrier that existed before, they're not there anymore.
Yeah, and it's that discovery, whether that's on YouTube or TikTok or wherever it is designed to lead to another form of monetization. So in the music industry, the whole point of it is it's shifted a lot from, what Total Request Live did in the United States, where it was very much dictated by the labels, and it was designed to kind of there was the illusion of choice. Certainly, there was voting involved, but it was your choices were usually the ones presented by the major labels, right? So it wasn't a level playing field. It was we here of these 20 artists that we all know are from big labels. Which one would you like? And now it's a much more level playing field that's really interesting and fascinating. But again, it's not about album sales. It's about getting people to go to a concert. It's about tours or touring. Same thing with if you're a YouTube creator, it's eventually getting people to a product, to commerce, to something else. So there's a discovery portion, right, in that, and then there's offshooting people to something else.
Mm-hmm.
For you, where I mean, we talked a little bit about the monetization angles. But where do you feel is the biggest potential? We talked about music, we've talked about the content, but where do you think is the biggest potential growth area for TheSoul going forward?
Yeah, I mean, we touched a little bit on it. Like, I think as part of the level playing field, we also see that industry like TV and broadcasts that before really wanted, like, it's a specific, to be pitched content in a certain way. Now we're starting
Mm-hmm.
to see more flexibility, even with streaming platforms like Netflix and so on, where more and more content and concepts that come from social media, actually they realize they translate well um,
Yeah.
into this platform. And obviously, like, realistically, like, advertisers are still investing a lot on TV because it's still a very effective way to target people. And it's a big screen, so it's a different experience. So the impact is there, and the budget are still big there. So it makes sense as well from a pure commercial point of view for different platforms to also pursue this kind of opportunity. Like, if we think about short form, we actually like tracking very closely, like the evolution of like how it can be monetized as a format and how it can lead to different things. So when we started to invest there was no clear business model. It reminds me a bit of again, online video back in 2005-6, where
Oh
everyone
yeah.
was saying, oh, there's no way that you can monetize this. And then I think YouTube introduced the skippable ads, and that was a bit of a, everyone was saying like, well, why are you going to watch the ad if you can skip it, right? uh, Turned out that advertiser evolved and started to make ads that you actually end up watching instead of the video that you were planning to watch. So yeah, the model was very unclear, but I think today YouTube itself has been giving back 70 billion to the creators on their platform. So there's definitely like something there. So I think for short form it's the same. Like, there's still like different models that are being played around. We talk about e-commerce. We're testing some concepts with sell e-commerce sales and trying to figure out as well how we can enable this conversion as well. And there's the monetization programs that started on YouTube, which are for us like growing month over month in terms of the effectiveness of monetization. We can see that they are putting bigger effort into selling this format. I think the same thing will happen with advertiser, where they will have to learn how to make short form content under 1 minute, which is appealing for the viewer, so they don't just skip to the next one, but actually it fits within the whole ecosystem, and you end up watching it as a user. So I think that's definitely interesting for us. We still use short form as a way to launch new concepts. So it's a great way for us to put something out, get quick feedback, even grow an
Yeah.
IP, and then spin it off into a longer form. So I think it's a great tool for that discovery as well. And then we talk a little bit about the music component as well. So I think, yeah, when it comes to, we're still like kind of content creator at heart, but yes, so that's when it comes to short. And also, like, that's a long answer to your question, but like another avenue that we're exploring now, it's like over the years we've developed these tools, these processes and skills to distribute our own content, but we can see that we can all, there's a lot of demand in the market for all the problems that we run into and build solutions for. So we're working with brands like Crayola, for instance, helping them with not just producing content, but also how to distribute their content across several platforms like YouTube, Pinterest, and so on. We're working with creators as well through Shorthand Studio, which is a US company, to help them also with, taking care of several platforms that they might not have time to look after or don't know necessarily about the opportunity. So yeah, we see that that's actually interesting because over the year we've built the scale and the systems and solutions that can actually benefit other people which have the same problem than we had.
No, exactly. I mean, that isn't a long-winded answer. That's a concise answer. I mean, it's because you have the ability to consult with all of your expertise and all you've learned, right, and all the data you have. So yes, there's the concept that you can do back-end consulting, but there's also the outward component, right, where there's obviously e-commerce, brand integration, platforming creators, a lot of different there. You just have a multitude of opportunities. I think one of the things I like to tell creators, and like obviously most people don't get to this scale, but regardless of scale, if you get to a point where you can platform others or share expertise or have value that you can put into the market, then that's leverage that you have that you can use somewhere. And I think most of us build something maybe not fully knowing. I think that's the I'm always reticent when somebody tells me they're like, yes, we knew this plan all along, we had a 10-year plan. I'm like, no, that's unrealistic. It's that you build as many assets as possible and you figure out what to do with them later over time, right? And the data and the market and people's preferences will kind of tell you and lead you to where you need to go next. But no, I think it's a fascinating.
Yeah, I think
Yeah,
your
I think it's a
experiment.
fascinating
I mean,
time.
that's been like,
Oh yeah.
also just, yeah. Again, we started some of the biggest thing we've done started as an experiment. So I think it's important to be ready to, and for actually like for a long time, to your point, we also didn't have still like a strategy where we think like, oh, this is a 3-year, 5-year vision, and then
Yeah.
pandemic comes along and everything changes. So yeah, I think we just try to keep like flexibility within the organization. We also have been lucky in a way because now it's a common thing, but like we were remote for since the inception of the company. Like, so
Yeah.
70% of our staff is remote, which means that when it wasn't possible to go to an office, we already had the whole the process figure out. We just had to adjust some of our content production. So yeah, I think that, yeah, we're trying to keep that flexibility in terms of work practices, but also like in terms of how we react to different things.
Well, I think that flexibility is super important. Like that's a really good example of how you were able to pivot faster. But the flexibility in content and everything else is super helpful. Victor, when I close these, I do something called keep it short. There are 3 questions. The questions are short. Your answers can be however long you would like. Are you ready?
Yes, I it's funny because I always say to people when they say I have a quick question and say, but is it a quick answer or not? So let's see.
Perfect. Well, we will see. Question 1. The piece of content or short form, long form, just the piece of content that you created that the reaction surprised you the most.
Okay, I think one of them is so it's a video of 5 Minute Craft family, I think, which was how to make soap in the form of your foot, which is kind of funny. Actually, and I mean, it's kind of a quirky video, but actually kind of funny, and but like really well done, like in terms of production. Like I don't know, there's something about it, and actually it went very viral on YouTube Shorts, and it for a while it was the most watched YouTube Shorts with 500 million. After that, some other videos came around, but yeah, I was kind of surprised of that reaction. But yeah, like I think that's also show the importance of yeah, living your creative, do your do enjoy and provide the structure, but then help them with the other aspect of the business. In this case was distribution on YouTube Shorts, and we I couldn't say that we would have predicted the success in this case.
Yeah, I mean that's the funny thing. Sometimes we put effort into a lot of effort into something that we think might work, and a little bit of effort into something that we don't, and we're surprised by which works and which doesn't. The other thing too, when you were talking, is like you're like, yeah, 500 million views, but then that got quickly surpassed. It's like I just remember doing a video in like 2011 and getting 6 million views and being like, this is the best thing ever. I'm so excited. And now at the scale that we're at on views, it's like, I'm like, that wouldn't even be beneficial.
Yeah, short views as well. Obviously, they're a little bit different, but yeah.
Exactly. But but the metrics are constantly changing. So, question two: how do you measure the success and viability of a new concept? When do you reach a tipping point where you want to put more resources into it?
Yeah, very good question. Actually, I mean, it's not going to be a very original answer, but we obviously look at momentum and profitability at some point. And one thing that we try to do well as well is to make sure that we stop anything that is clearly not going in the right direction. So typically, 3 months is the moment where we'll start to look, and it's not that we need any profitability within that time frame necessarily, but we want to see a momentum and something working there. And within these 3 months, there can be a lot of adaptation and changes, by the way. So maybe the content in the first month will be different than the one in second, and so on. But yeah, this will be that kind of trajectory within a specific product. And we're actually quite good. I think that's another thing, like because we have data from the platform, and in most cases, revenue is almost real time. We are also tracking, making sure to track the cost that we invest, so we can actually aggregate this data and have pretty good understanding of predictability of potential future profitability or where revenue will go as well. So that's been a big help as well to stop concept quickly and then allocate the team to something else that might be more profitable or more interesting.
No, I actually like the specificity of the 3 month part of that answer. Like sometimes I get an answer that's far more vague to a similar question. To me, too, I think to add a layer to that is that you're probably, if all things are equal on the view count of two separate platform or concepts that you're creating, I would assume that one may lend better to future monetization than the other, just depending on what the content is, right? And where you can take that. And that might inform what you do going forward. Am I wrong?
Yeah, that's right. I mean, obviously, we will usually start with a platform in mind, but then also aiming to see how we can make the most of like the piece of original content that has been created. So if we can distribute it at relatively low cost as a Facebook reel, which we do, then we will do that as well, because there could be momentum there that we didn't expect. So yeah, I think definitely there is always like a target audience, not necessarily a platform, but a target audience. But then we make sure that if that audience could be somewhere else, we also want to get the content there and see what happened in this case.
Question three, and this is very specific to a podcast called It's No Fluke. When you hear someone say that virality in content or the idea of going viral is completely accidental, do you say, yeah, or do you go, well, there's a formula?
A good question. I think that one could be a long answer, but I'll try to keep it short. So I think that when think about virality, it's for me it's like this concept of informed gut feeling. So you can say it's completely random, but then you can still set some parameters that will maximize your chance of doing something that you know is going to work based on your experience, based on the data that you have, based on pure gut feeling and inspiration of the moment. So yeah, it's kind of in between answer, I guess. So I don't think there's
No,
a
no,
formula,
no, no.
because then I would have to just go and, I think, prove that we can make anything go viral. But I think it's kind of, yeah, if you use all the data that you have, your experience, your skills plus inspiration, let's say you can have a good shot at this, but you need to make sure that you have the right skills, you're looking at the right data points, and you have the right inspiration.
Yeah, I think my running theory on it is if you have a bigger network to start, if you have multiple places where you can seed content, if you have partners who can help seed content to at least get that out there, then you've created at least a greater chance of success. But again, then even with all of those factors in mind, right? Yes, you might get more opportunities, but again, it comes down to the audience. It comes down to the audience timing. Does that content hit at the right time in the right way? So I think there are ways to make it more possible and plausible on the back end, certainly if you have the right resources. But that being said, I've stopped trying to predict what people like, love, and will want to share more.
Exactly. Yeah. Otherwise, probably would have a different business if you could predict 100% accuracy, this kind of thing.
If I could predict consumer psychology to an 100% degree level, Victor, we wouldn't be doing this podcast. I would
Well,
be
I'm
on
glad
an
you don't
island.
then.
or if I could, I would also not be sharing that.
Yeah, exactly. Usual secret
So
life.
maybe I do, and I will never tell you. I don't know. But Victor, thank you so much for joining. It's a pleasure. It's a pleasure to kind of talk about the business behind really good content and how to make it monetizable. And I think this will be really valuable for the audience. So thank you.
Thanks a lot, Jeff.
All right.